Hello, everyone. For my viewers all over the world, welcome to David Oniwi's live stream on government and political science. As we have earlier promised, that this platform is an educative and informative platform where we can, share ideas and knowledge about academic academical topics. So we are sending greetings to you all over the world, in Africa, you know, um, in Europe. If you are watching from Germany, if you are watching from Britain, if you are watching from India, from France, and every part of the world, we say welcome. If you're watching from Africa, from Kenya, from South Africa, from Nigeria, and other parts of the world, we also say welcome. If you're watching from, from India, Pakistan, just name it, welcome as well. And if you're watching from Ukraine, from Russia, from, from other parts of the world, we also say a big welcome to this special platform. This platform is an educational platform. Is a platform that you can gain, most especially for those that are in the academic world, most especially those that are studying government, that are studying international relations, that are studying political economy, that are studying political science, that are studying public administration, just name it. This platform is meant for you. So, in this platform, we're going to be looking at various topics in governments. We're going to look at what we call government itself. We're going to look at what we call the state. We're going to look at authority. We're going to look at power. We're going to look at totalitarianism. We're going to look at capitalism. We're going to look at communism. We're going to look at socialism. We're going to look at various topics on that government, constitutional development in Nigeria. We're going to look at the definition of presidential system of government. We're going to look at the definition of feudalism. We're going to look at the definition of all those topics that you can ever name in government. So it's going to be an interesting platform. It's going to be an interesting, platform where we can share ideas. And the beauty of this topic, of this platform, is that you can learn a lot of things from us. You can learn a lot of things from my platform, and I can bet you can never regret it. So one of the things we're going to do is that we want you to come on online. You drop your comments, you drop a comment on how we can serve you better in this regard. So it's a platform, it's an avenue through which you can learn from us in this platform. So this platform is also meant for those people especially that are studying political science. Political science. You can watch one of my videos, because I'm a very pragmatic individual that over the years I've been able to lecture and impact people positively, and most of them are what can testify to that goodness in their lives today because it has tremendously what added one or two things to their lives. So it has been a platform where a lot of people have been able to acquire knowledge from us and learn from us. So we're going to look at topics you know like dialectical materialism under political science. We're going to look at what we call power. We're going to look at what we call comparative politics in government. Comparative politics. A lot of topics: political economy, international relations, international organizations, and the rest of them. So it's a platform where you can learn a lot of things. So for those that are in university, mostly in Nigeria, that there's an ongoing strike going on in the country, and most of our students are actually at home now. You can avail yourself the opportunity of coming online to watch our program. So it's going to be impactful, it's going to be beneficial to you. So while you're at home, it's not going to be a dull moment. You can always we are going to come up with a topic that is called government today. Government. We still have series of topics on the state, which I'm still going to talk about. We're going to look at the evolution of the state, the definition of the state, the conceptual definition or fundamental definition of the state. But what you should know or you should take note of is that there is no universal definition of this concept that is called the state. We're going to look at a lot of topics under the state. We're going to look at the characteristics. We're going to look at John Locke's theory on the state, the social contract theory on the state. We're going to look at a lot of things under the state. So it's not going to be a dull moment. So we want to use this medium to invite you to come up online and watch our videos, our lectures online. So this lecture is a live lecture. Is a live lecture. So it's a live lecture where you can actually benefit a lot of things from us. So today we are going to look at what we call governments. And we're going to look at government as an institution of the state. We're looking at what we call government as an institution of the state. Government as an institution of the state. So before we proceed, we're going to define what is government. What is government? What is government? Now, when you are talking about government, we can define government as a machinery or an apparatus. Government is a machinery or an apparatus through which the will of the state is expressed, or an apparatus through which the will of the state is formulated, expressed, and attained. So, government is a machinery, it is an institution of the state. So, government was actually a machinery or an apparatus through which the will of the state is what is formulated, expressed, and attained. So, look at those three words: formulated, expressed, and what? And attained. Government makes policies every day. Government makes policies made by the government in the state as an institution can what? Can actually affect the state positively or negatively. So government makes policies, they formulate policies. So it's a machinery through which what the state can be able to attain the greater good. And what do we mean by the greater good? When you're talking about the greater good, we're saying that government is a machinery through which what the aspirations, the desires of what of every individual in the institutional state can actually what attain their level. So what we're saying here is that government, without government, the state can actually degenerate into what we call anarchy. The state can degenerate into what we call anarchy. And what do we mean by anarchy? When you talk about anarchy, you are talking about a situation where there is a breakdown of what? Of law and order. So anarchy occurs when there is a breakdown of law and order. That is anarchy. So a society where there is anarchy, there is disorderliness. A society where there is anarchy, there is breakdown of law and order because people will not be compliant to the body of rules and regulations that governs the society. Because in every society, there are rules and regulations, and individuals or group must abide by the rules and the regulations. When individuals go against the rules and regulations, there is always a punishment, but the punishment must not exceed the amount of what? Of deterrence. I mean, the amount of what? Of offense that is committed by the individual. That is, the offense committed must commensurate with the punishment of the individual. So what we're saying there is that without government, the society will degenerate into what we call anarchy. That is, there is no existing law that is guiding such a society, and for that reason, people can take the law into their hands. And that is why Thomas Hobbes, one of the political scientists of that time, said that in such a society, it is called a primitive society. And in such a society, life is what? Is short, solitary, nasty, and brutish. Life is what? Is solitary, is poor, is not nasty, brutish, and what? And short. That is because of the fact that people take the law into their hands, there's every possibility that the will of the state may not be accomplished. And for the individuals what in such a state, their wills and aspirations will not be accomplished as well. So that's what we're talking about here. So in a society where there is anarchy, there is always what? The tendency for human being to exhibit their level of what? Of wickedness. Human beings will exhibit what we call the highest level of what? Of wickedness. Because man is what? Is naturally what? Wicked. There's every tendency for man to exhibit his what? His wickedness where there are no existing rules and regulations that can actually guide what? His actions. So he can exhibit his wickedness. So man is naturally wicked, and apart from that, this society, according to Thomas Hobbes, is what? A primitive society. Is a primitive society where life is what, like mentioned earlier, what life is what ensure that the state does not degenerate into anarchy. There is a need for people to surrender their self-will to a body called government. So it is this government board that can now regulate the affairs of those in that state. So government will regulate the affairs of those in that particular state so that life will not be primitive, life will not be solitary, will not be brutish, will not be nasty, and the tendency for anarchy to exist in such society will be reduced to the barest minimum. So this body of individuals constitute what is called government, and they are given the privilege and the power to what? To regulate the activities of what? Of the people in the society. So they exhibit what we call authority and what? And their power. So they regulate, the control, and also what? Make sure that what? That the existing law that governs the society is adhered to at the end of the day. So people must adhere to existing norms, to the existing rules and regulations. And when there are no what? Compliance with the existing laws and regulations in society or the existing rules in society, then there is going to be a punishment. Like I said earlier, that the punishment that is given to an individual must what? Must commensurate to the offense that is being committed. That is being committed. So now, what we're saying here is that because of the fact that people want to live in a society where they can be able to achieve or to be able to accomplish their whims, their desires, there is a need for them to surrender, to place their rights to a group of people that will what? That will protect their interest. Don't forget that man is a political animal. And because man is a political animal, according to Aristotle, man is a political animal, according to Aristotle. So man as a political animal has a tendency to socialize, to interact, to mix with other members of the society. And when it socializes and mixes what with every member of the society, then there's a tendency for human behavioral attribute to be exhibited. What do we mean by that? By human behavioral attitude. What we're saying there is that the behavior of Mr. A is not the same thing as the behavior of Mr. B. So there must be something that should be able to regulate the behaviors, the attributes of every individual in such a society. And that is where the government comes in. So without the government, the society will degenerate into what we call anarchy, the breakdown of law and order. And according to Thomas Hobbes, that is the situation whereby you have what? The primitive nature of man. Because man is what? Is naturally what? Wicked. And according to Machiavelli, in one of his books called The Prince, he wrote a book called The Prince. Machiavelli said that might is what is right. That is a society where the strong will dominate the weak. Where the strong will dominate the weak. That's what Machiavelli is talking about. He said, in every society, you have two kinds of people. You have the weak and the strong. And according to Machiavelli in The Prince, he said what that might is right, that when man dominates what his fellow human being, it is a right thing to be done. And that's why Machiavelli said that in the pursuance of all interest, all things are permissible in the pursuance, provided the end will justify the means. You understand? So the government is very essential. Government is very important. Government is what is mandatory. It is a mandamus. It is obligatory that in every society there must be a government. There must be a group of individuals that is called what? Government. That is constituted to regulate the behavior, the attributes of every human being in the society. Now, let us quickly look at what we call government as an art of governing. Government as an art of governing. Government as an art of governing. Now, we talked about what we call government as an institution of what? Of the state. Government as an institution of the state. Now, let us look at government as an art of governing. So, what is government as an art of governing? Government as an art of governing can be defined as a body vested with the power and authority for maintaining security and stability in a given state. So, government as an art of governing is a body vested with the power and authority for maintaining security, stability, and conventional law in a given state. So, as an art of governing, it is vested with that power because without power, government cannot function effectively. So, without power, government is like a dog that is barking but cannot bite. When you say that government can be compared to a dog that is barking that cannot bite, it means that government does not have the political power. So without political power, government cannot function effectively. So for government to function effectively, it must have what we call political power. So without political power, the government is incapacitated. Government is incapacitated. So political power is very important in what? In government. Political power is very important in government. So without political power, government will be incapacitated and government will be ineffective. Government will be incapacitated and government will be ineffective. So government as an art of governing is that government is what? Is vested with the power and authority to maintain what? Security, peace and stability by making conventional laws and fundamental laws in a given state. So, government as an institution of the state and government as an art of governing, they are interrelated. Because I will say that government can be defined as a machinery or apparatus through which the will of the state is what is formulated, expressed, and attained. And we're not saying that government, as an art of governing, is a body vested with the power and authority to maintain what? Security, peace, and stability by making conventional laws in a given state. So we'll have looked at two subtopics now. We have looked at government as an institution of the state, and we have also looked at government as what? As an art of governing. Now, what are the characteristics of government? What are the characteristics of government? We're quickly going to mention some of them, in this topic. What are the characteristics of government? Or what are the attributes of government? Or what are the features of government? Now, if you move from one country to another, if you move from Nigeria to China, to US, to UK, to France, to any part of the world, you always find the same thing. And what is that thing? We're going to quickly look at them now. We're going to quickly enumerate them. I'm going to enumerate them now so that we pick them one after the other. The first one is what we call political power. Political power. Number two, first one is what? Political power. political power. Political power. The second one is what we call law. Law. Don't forget, the first one is called political power. Political power. The second one is called law. Lawmaking. You can say lawmaking. Political power, lawmaking. Then the third one is what we call personnel. 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 Then the fourth one is what we call revenue. Revenue. Don't forget, political power, lawmaking, personnel, revenue, and the fifth one is what we call public support. Public support. Public support. The fifth one is what we call public support. And lastly, we have what we call welfare services. Welfare services. So we have six there. Six. Number one is what we call political power. Number two, we said lawmaking. Number three, we said personnel. Number four, we said revenue. Number five, we said public support. And number six, we said welfare services. Welfare services. Now, let us quickly look at them one after the other so that we can have a clear picture of what we are talking about here. Now, the first one is what we call political power. Now, if you look at my analysis so far so good in this topic, you will discover that I've mentioned political power several times. Now, what do we mean by political power? When you talk about political power, you are talking about the vested power that is what? That is enshrined, or that is what? That is operated by the government in the state. And I said, as I earlier mentioned, without political power, the government cannot function effectively. Without political power, the government is incapacitated. Without political power, the government cannot be able to carry out its whims and caprices in the society. Its whims and caprices in its society are in the society. And for the government to be able to execute its policies, to be able to implement its policies, to be able to formulate its policies, then political power is what? Is very, very important. It is indispensable. It is indispensable. Now, for the government to be able to operate its political power, there are some tiers of government that actually assist the government in what? In achieving its aims and caprices. And we're talking about here, we're talking about the executive arm of the government, which can be headed by a president or a prime minister, which can be headed by a president or a prime minister. In Nigeria, we are operating on what we call the presidential system of government, where we have a president, an executive president. In Britain, for example, they operate on what we call the parliamentary system of government, or Westminster system of government, or cabinet system of government. So you can call it a Westminster system of government, you can call it a parliamentary system of government, you can call it a parliamentary system of government. Whichever one you call it is the same thing. Parliamentary, Westminster, or cabinet system of government, where you have what? A prime minister. Where you have what we call a prime minister. You have a prime minister in Britain. So in US also, you have what we call the president. And the president of US is what? Is Joe Biden. In Nigeria, we have what? Buhari as the president of Nigeria. So in Britain, if you go there, they operate what we call the parliamentary system of government, where you have the prime minister, called Johnson. Now, so then we also have the legislative arm of government. In Nigeria, we have what we call a bicameral legislature. Bicameral legislature. Now, what do we mean by a bicameral legislature? We talk about bicameral legislature. You are talking about a system of government where you have two legislative chambers. You have two legislative chambers. You have the upper house and the lower house. You have the upper house and the lower house. The upper house and the lower house. In Nigeria, we have the National Assembly. we have the National Assembly. So I mentioned the executive legislature. They also have what we call the judiciary. The judiciary. The judiciary. Judiciary is also, an organ of government. The judiciary is responsible for the interpretation of the law, and the legislature is responsible for lawmaking, and the executive is responsible for the implementation, formulation, execution, and what? And implementation. That is what? The duties of what? Of the executive. Then the legislature is responsible for lawmaking, and judiciary is what? Is responsible for the interpretation of law. Then number two, law. That is number two, law. A country without a law, there is no offense. Laws are made for men, and laws are they serve as a guide to regulate human activity. Like I said before, that human behavioral attributes are different and they are not the same. So people tend to execute their behaviors, and sometimes in the execution of what of their behaviors, they tend to contradict or go against the law of the state. And for such people, there are existing laws that should punish those people. There are existing laws that punish offenders in every state. So the laws that are made in such a state are binding on everybody in the state, both the government and the governor. In other words, nobody is above the law, according to A.V. Dicey, under the rule of law. And what we by the rule of law? What the rule of law is saying is that the law is no respecter of anybody, and nobody is above the law. Nobody is what is a sacred cow under the law. Everybody is equal before the law. That is the egalitarian nature of the law. That is everybody in the law, both the ruler and the ruled, are all equal before the law. So laws are made for men, and such laws they tend to regulate human activities in the state. Then number three, which is personnel. Every government requires a personnel to be able to function effectively in the state. This personnel is called civil service. Civil service. So for government to be able to function effectively, government requires what? The civil servant or the civil service that are departments in what? Under the executive arm of government that helps to carry out government duties and what? And responsibilities on daily basis. So government has what we call personnel. Then the next one is what we call revenue. Government requires revenue for the government to be able to function effectively. Government has a lot of numerous, uncountable duties and responsibilities that needs to be fulfilled on every day. And these duties and responsibilities can only be done by the government when there is money. So for the government to be able to execute its programs, for the government to be able to provide infrastructural facilities, for the government to be able to provide what we call social services in society, for the government to be able to improve the standard of living of people, for the government to be able to provide security, they require what we call revenue. So revenue is very, very important. Then number five is what we call public support. Every government, whether military or a civilian government or a democratic government, they require what we call public support. Even a military government, we want to legitimize its government. What do I mean by legitimize? That it we want to allow, we attempt to make its government to be widely accepted by the people by carrying out what good policies that will endear the people to such a government. So every government requires what we call public support. So, and that's why every government always want because public support will determine the chances of the government coming back to power when election is being conducted. So in a democratic society, the government that public support favors will always win the election. And that is why in a democratic state, government always want to execute or implement or formulate policies that will endear the government to the people by providing what? Infrastructural facilities, by providing what we call, good standard of living, by providing what we call security, by providing what we call, security, by providing employment opportunity, and the rest of them. So when all these things are put into place, then we can say that, well, that such a government will have the public support of the people. So even that's why I say that even a military government, we cease to legitimize is what is government. We're still going to talk about what we call legitimacy. In this topic, we're still going to talk about what we call legitimacy, because legitimacy itself is what is a topic on its own under government. Public support, mobilization, and the rest of them, they all fall under what we call public, legitimacy. So when you talk about legitimacy, general acceptance of a political system has been in line with the laws of the land, has been in line with the constitution of the land. So when such a thing happens, the say just the government is a legitimate government. A legitimate government. Lastly, we have what we call welfare services. In advanced countries, or in developing countries, or all over the world in general, governments provide what we call welfare services. Welfare services. And welfare services are provided by the government to improve the standard of living of the people. And what are these welfare services? We talk about a good healthcare system where mortality rates, will be reduced to the barest minimum. Good healthcare system, good educational system, good, provision of employment opportunities. You understand? Improvement in the standard of living, security, where people can sleep in the night and close their two eyes without any fear. Then we'll talk about what the modernization of the army, the modernization of the armed forces to serve as a deterrent to any form of external aggression or internal insurrection. External aggression or internal insurrection. You understand? So these are part of the welfare services that must be provided by the government. And in some countries in the world, government pays people that don't have jobs money. They pay them money. They give them money. They provide money for them, to sustain them. In other words, we can regard such a society as what? As a least-fairer society. Least-fairer society. We call it a least-fairer society. A least-fairer society. We're still going to talk about that one. We're still going to talk about capitalism, a centrally planned economic system. We talk about communism, We talk about, capitalism, a free market system, like what we have in advanced countries or the metropolitan states or the advanced or metropolitan states or the center of the center, because that topic is going to come up on what we call the center of the periphery. We talk about the center of the center, the center of the periphery of the periphery. We talk about the difference between the periphery and what? And the center. You understand? We talk about these two things. They are very, very important and very, very, So we're still going to look at this topic under the center of the periphery theory. And we're going to look at what we call the dependency theory. The dependency theory. What's the dependency theory? When a country is dependent, the relationship between the advanced country and the developing country is what we call an asymmetrical relationship. Asymmetrical relationship. What do we mean by asymmetrical relationship? If we're talking about an asymmetrical relationship, we're talking about a relationship that is not egalitarian, an unequal relationship, and a relationship that's based on the exploitation, that is based on what? Exploitation, that is based on dominance. Relationship between the metropolitan and the developing, and the concept of development and what? And developing. Because when you use the word developing and underdevelopment, this topic, you're going to enjoy a lot of things. You're going to come across so many times I'm going to use, So you will never regret it. An asymmetrical relationship. The developed country, the developing countries, and the rest of them, when you say developing is a word that's being used to show that these states or these nation states are moving towards development. But in the real sense or in the actual sense, they are not really developed. They are dependent. Their survivors are dependent on what? On the metropolitan state that determines the policies that are being made by these countries through the so-called IMF and international banks, IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank and the rest of them. They make policies for these countries, and these policies, but the fact that these countries they need money, they have to sign the contract and the rest of them, and they give them the money. But unfortunately, because of the perforation, or because of the lack of political will on the part of the so-called political leaders. You observe that at the end of the day, this money are not meant for, they're not used for the purpose for which they are actually what being borrowed. And that is the reason why development has become a mirage. It has become an utopia. It has become utopia, a mirage. It has become what? Something that is not realistic. It has become so impossible. So, welfare services, like I mentioned earlier on, welfare services is meant to improve the standard of living of the people, to give the people a sense of living, to give them a standard of living, to make life worthwhile. Because the whole essence of what of the state is to achieve a common goal. And what is the common goal? Happiness. According to Plato, Aristotle, and the rest of these guys. You understand? So when we come, we're still going to deal with this topic under what we call dialectical materialism. We are going to look at the negation of the negation. We are going to look at, negation of the negation. What do you mean by this? The contradiction of the social forces. The contradiction of the social forces. We are going to look at what we call spirit. I talk about spirit. You don't talk about spirit itself that, in the spiritual world. It's not spirit we're talking about. It's a different concept entirely. We're going to talk about dialectical material. What is dialect? We're going to talk about materialism. We're going to talk about the negation of the negation. We're going to talk about the social forces, the contradiction of the social forces, the spirits. We're going to talk about Aristotle, Plato, the Epicureans, mention just a lot of these guys. We're going to discover about these guys. We're going to look at all them. We're going to talk about what we call the original sin, the libido dominandi, the cupiditas, the original sin. You understand? The original sin. We're going to look at the original sin, the city states. It's a very interesting topic. Now, before I round up my topic, let us look at the functions of government. Functions of government. When you talk about functions of government, what does it mean? When you talk about functions of government, every government in the world has a function. So let us quickly out what are these functions. But one of them is lawmaking. Every government makes law. Every government makes law. And the laws that are made by this government are what? They are meant to regulate the activities of people in the society. And when there is non-compliance to these laws, there are punishments. There are punishments. Just like when somebody says that Caesar's wife must live above was sin. Caesar's wife must live above sin. One of the literatures, something somewhere there. Caesar's wife must live above sin. He that comes to law must come with what? With purity. He that comes to the law must come with purity. So let's leave that one. So lawmaking. So government makes law. And the law that are made in that society, in every society, is binding on everybody, both the ruler and the ruled. And that's what A.V. Dicey was talking about. The English professor of law. He said that everybody is what? Is equal before the law. He's talking about equality before the law. He's talking about the impartiality of the law. You must have access to the law. Under the law, an accused person is presumed to be innocent until he is found guilty by a competent judge and a competent what? Court with competent jurisdiction. And that's why the policeman arrest you on the road or probably try to check you and the rest of them, you are innocent. You cannot call you an armed robber or a thief. Is wrong. That is a defamation of character. Character assassination. So that's a defamation of character. So laws are made for everybody in society, both the rulers and the ruled. And when these laws are being violated, there is always a punishment. The maintenance of law and order. The police, the responsibility of the duty of the state is to maintain law and order. And how do they maintain that? They maintain the law and order through the police. The police, and through the what? Through the courts, and through the prison system. Let me explain this. What do I mean by the police? The police what? They maintain the law and order. When an individual what commits a crime or it goes against the law of the society, there must be a punishment. And that's why when the police comes in, they will arrest the person, they will take him to the court. Then the person what is punished by the court. And when is he going to? He's not going to his house. He's going to the prison where he's going to serve his punishment, depending on what on the offense he has committed. It depending on how grievous the offense the individual has committed. Law, maintenance of law, and other. Then defense. It is the duty of the government to modernize the country's armed forces. We are in an ever-changing world where countries are spending billions of dollars. Like the United States of America, they spend billions of dollars on what? On defense. On defense. And that's why the United States of America is the most strongest country in the world. So countries must what? Must defend their territorial sovereignty. They must defend their territory. They must also what? Defend their sovereignty. And what is sovereignty? Sovereignty is the absolute power of the state to exercise supreme legal authority within its territorial jurisdiction without any form of external control or influence. Sovereignty. So sovereignty is what is the absolute power of the state. Listen to that word. Sovereignty is the absolute power of the state to exercise supreme legal authority within its territorial jurisdiction without any form of external control or influence. That is sovereignty for you. So defense of the country. Then another one is what we call protection of lives and properties. Protection of lives and their properties. It is also the duty of the state to protect the lives and properties of its citizens. And how does the government do that? The government must modernize the security agencies. People should be able to move freely on the street. People should be able to move freely, travel from one place to the other. They should have what? Right to life. They should have what? Right to properties. They should have right to everything, to religion and the rest of them. So government must protect what? Their lives and their property. Then administration of justice. It is the duty of what? Of the judicial system to administer justice. In every society, there will always be disputes, but the judiciary is an umpire to settle such a dispute. Instead of taking the law into your hands, you can approach what judiciary to settle your dispute between individuals, between corporate, between countries and the rest of them. So countries or states have mechanisms through which they administer justice in the society. They also call what we call, social services. Social services. Government must also provide what we call social service. The other one is what we call provision of employment opportunity. Provision of employment opportunity. Government must provide employment opportunity to its people to improve their standard of living. When employment opportunities are being provided in the society, you observe that the tendency for human beings to commit crime will be reduced to the barest minimum. Then we also have maintenance of external relations. Maintenance of what we call external relations. What do we mean by maintenance of external relations? Government cannot live in isolation. According to Aristotle, man is a political animal. Man is a political animal. Man cannot live in isolation. And because he cannot live in isolation, he must interact with every member of his communities. The same thing applies between states. So nation states cannot live in isolation, cannot live in what we call isolationism. Isolationism. Before the First World War, the United States of America adopted a policy of what we call isolationism. And what's isolationism? Isolation is a concept idea where the state decided to develop itself internally. So at that period of time, the United States was, you know, decided to isolate itself, and that was why when the First World War started, you know, America, because of its policy of isolation, was able to develop its economy mightily at that time. So right now, no country can live in isolation. You have to interact. So there is diplomatic relationship between countries of the world. So countries of the world they engage what in economic activities. They engage in political activities. They engage in economic activities. They engage in what we call, social activities, cultural activities, educational activities. So no country can live in isolation. So countries of the world maintain external relations with each other. They maintain external relations with each other. Because why? There is a high level of what? Of interdependency among nations of the world because of the inequitable distribution of resources. Because of the inequitable distribution of resources. So there is a level of what? Of interdependency among the countries of the world. So on this note, we have looked at the definition of what? Of government and institution of the state. We have looked at what we call government as an act of what? Of governing. We have looked at what we call, characteristics, features, and attributes of what? Of government. And we also look at what we call the functions of government. So I believe this topic has been very beneficial to you. And you now have a clear picture of the definition of what we call government. You have the definition of what we call government. You have the definition of what we call government as an act of governing. They also have the characteristics of what we call government. One of the characteristics of what we call political power, lawmaking, personnel, revenue, for public support, welfare services. They will also mention the function of government, defense, lawmaking, political power, maintenance of law and order, provision of social services, employment opportunity, maintenance of, what, of external relations. So I believe you have gained a lot. We're going to be coming with these topics, you know, regularly so that it can be of benefit to a lot of our students all over the world, a lot of people all over the world. So come to David Oniwis, come to the fountain of knowledge, come to the fountain of what? Of information. David Oniwis. That is my channel on Facebook. David Oniwis. It's a live stream program. It's a live stream lecture where you can what you can achieve. You can it can be of immense benefit to you as a student, and it will help you a lot. So on this note, we're going to round up on what we call government today. Government as institution of the state, government as an art of governing, characteristics of government, and the functions of government. I remain David Oni. And my Facebook channel is David Oni Wiz. Wiz. David Oni Wiz. This program will continue. We'll be coming up with different topics every time to be of benefit. We're going to look at public administration, topics in political science, topics in government, topics in psychology, political economy, international relations, and a host of them. Thank you for coming up to watch this program. To my fans all over the world, I say a very big thank you. To meet next time, I remain your humble David Oni. And my Facebook channel is what is David Oniwiz. Thank you for coming up and God bless. Bye bye. Bye. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another segment of intellectual brainstorming and academic excellence. My name is David Oni, and my YouTube channel is David Oni Wiz, or you can also find my video on Facebook. We want to say a very big thank you to our returning subscribers and our viewers. Thank you so much for coming over to watch our videos every now and then whenever we upload to the internet. We want to say a very big thank you to you. And if you have actually not subscribed, I can bet you that you are losing so many things. So you need to, click. We're just appealing to you that you need to click on that notification button, and apart from clicking on the notification button, you can leave your comment and also like and share our videos. So we are appealing to you, please go right now and click on that notification button, click on the comment, and also click on the like and share button. Subscribe to our channel, and also apart from that, you can follow us on the Facebook as well. So today we're going to be looking at something different, something dynamic, something extraordinary, something interesting, something different, a different perspective, a different, idea, enlightenment, a different, educational perspective today. In other words, we're going to look at a very different topic on what I call problems of urbanization in Nigeria. Problems of urbanization in Nigeria. Last time I discussed about urbanization, we looked at the definition of urbanization, theoretical perspective of urbanization, and we looked at the various theoretical perspective as it relates to to urbanization. So today we're quickly going to look at what we call the problems of urbanization. Despite the fact that urbanization is what is the pathway to development or modernization, it has what its own peculiaristic problems that is associated with it, and those problems are what we are going to discuss now. Now, what are these problems? These problems are what are myriad, they are divergent, there are many, there are so many of these problems that at the end of the day, it makes what development or modernization to what to be a mirage. And at the end of the day, it is not actually, it is not actually facilitating growth in Nigeria and other developing countries. So we are going to look at the case, take Nigeria as well as a case study, and we relate it to other developing countries as it relates to these hindrances of problems to urbanization. Now, one of the problems of urbanization is what we call a population explosion. Population explosion. Now, what do you mean by population explosion? What we mean by population explosion is that we're talking about overpopulation. Overpopulation. Most of the areas, or most of these areas that we refer to as being urban, they have this peculiaristic problem, which is population problem, because a lot of people are always migrating from the what? From the local area to where? To the urban area, because of some factors. Those factors might be what? The issue of what? Of unemployment, to seek for greener pastures. You understand? So when you talk about population explosion, is one of the problems that is associated with what? With urbanization. Then number two problem is what we call, inadequate what? Social services. Inadequate social services. One of the problems that militates against urban areas in Nigeria is what is the problem of what? Of inadequate social infrastructural services. Now we have, for example, in this part of our world, there is no constant power supply. They also have the problem of bad roads. Bad roads. We have the problem of health problem, health issues. Sometimes to have a basic medical services in our own part of the world here is a mirage. Those that have access to good medical services are those at the what at the higher level, the elite. These are the people that have access to good medical services. And that's why in most of these areas or countries or developing countries, it's called about that in a year, you find out that people don't even go for medical checkup. Medical checkup is what is a mirage. But those that go for the medical checkup are what? Are those at the higher level, the elite. They also have the problem of what? Of unemployment. Unemployment is also another major problem of urbanization. You discover that a lot of people do not have jobs.
as they are migrating to the urban centers, there is no job for them. So they are just coming there, roaming up and down those streets without any form of jobs. So unemployment is one of the characteristics of one of the problems of urbanization in Nigeria. They will also have what we call inadequate housing. Inadequate housing. It's called out that a lot of people in urban areas are always homeless. In fact, this problem is not only peculiar to developing countries. You also have some of these problems in advanced countries, where you find out that some people are homeless. They don't have any home. So because of that, they sleep on the streets. They sleep on the streets. They also had increase in In crime rates. Increase in crime rates. It's called that one of the problems of urban areas is that a lot of crimes are usually committed. You have in urban areas what we call night marauders. Night marauders, that is armed robbers. We have armed robbers, thieves, attacking people, burglary, arson. You have problem of rape. You have problem of kidnapping. All these are associated with what? With urban areas. They also have what we call environmental problems. In fact, in this part of our country now, we have some areas that have been submerged as a result of flooding. Flooding. So a lot of people have lost their lives as a result of this problem. In fact, in Nigeria now, this problem is rampant now. In some part of Nigeria, in Kogi State, in Bayelsa, most of these areas have been flooded, and because of that, it has led to what we call health problem, cholera, spread of what? Of cholera. That is another point. Health problems. Health problems. So cholera is what is rampant in this area of our world now because of what? Because of what? Of environmental pollution. Environmental pollution, environmental problems. Then we also have uncoordinated what? Development. Uncoordinated development. Most of these areas are not evenly developed. We have some areas that are developed, and you have some areas that are not even developed at all. So the problem of uneven development is one of the characteristics of problem militating against what urbanization in Nigeria and other developing societies. Then we also have what we call poverty. Poverty is rampant in urban areas, and why is the reason like that? It is so because most of these people are not employed, and when they are not gainfully employed, you might not be able to have what? An improved what? Standard of living. And in an area where there is a high cost of living, you discover that in such areas, poverty will become what? The order of the day. So in most urban areas in Nigeria, there is what? There is the issue or problem of what? Of poverty. There also have what we call a problem of what? Of maintenance. Most of the, most of the infrastructural facilities in this part of our world, of developing countries, are not well, maintained. In fact, in some part of Lagos now, it is not even motorable. You cannot drive your cars to most of this area because the roads are very, very bad. And this, makes it difficult for you to create a link between the rural area and the urban areas. And the problem that this creates is that you have what? High cost of living, because by the time you bring those raw materials or the finished goods from the rural areas to the urban areas, it will cost a lot of what? A lot of money. And because of that, it will lead to what we call a high cost of what? Of living. High cost of what? Of living. Then you also have what we call, the attitude in ineptitude attitude, the lackadaisical attitude, the indifferent attitude of what? Of the government. Government what? They have poor attitude on what? On urban or what? Or regional planning. It's called out that most of the areas that we call urban areas today, they are not, well arranged. They are not well planned. In fact, by the time you look at the structure, you discover out that these structures are not well planned, and because of that, it is actually affecting what? Development in this area. They also have what we call a waste disposal system. Waste disposal system. In fact, that one is very problematic in Lagos. You call it what cup? You call it what cup? Where somebody will, kind of defecate in a nylon bag and they will trash it out. In fact, if you go to most of these areas, you know what I'm talking about. They don't have a good waste management system, and by the time the sewage or the septic tank is what is filled up We discovered that people begin to defecate in what? In nylon bags, and they trash them into what? Into the gutters or the lagoons, creating what? Environmental problems all over the whole place. So these are the problems that are associated with what? With urbanization in Nigeria and other developing parts of the world. I'll quickly go through them now. Number one, we talked about what we call population explosion, that is overpopulation. We also mentioned what the problem was of provision of infrastructural facility. We mentioned the problem was of illiteracy. We mentioned the problem of what of unemployment. We mentioned the problem of poverty. We mentioned what we call the uncoordinated or uneven development. Then we mentioned what we call problem of what of maintenance. Then we mentioned what we call what the problem of what of waste disposals. Now, all these problems are what are associated with urbanization in Nigeria, despite the fact that urbanization is what is a very good thing, is a pattern or the road path or to development in any part of the world. But in some developing country, urbanization is like a cause, despite its advantages. So these are the problems that are associated with the urbanization in Nigeria. I hope you have learned a lot of things today. I remain what your humble and loyal servant, David Oni. And my YouTube and Facebook channel is David Oni Wiz. You can go there and watch my videos, and don't forget to subscribe or to follow me on Facebook or on the YouTube. And don't also to forget to click on that notification button so that whenever I come up with any video, you'll be the first to watch those videos. So also don't forget to share my videos. You can share my videos, click on on the like, and also don't forget to make your comment on how to serve you better in my lectures. So you will agree with me now that my lecture has been very informative, it has been enlightening, it has been educative, it has been mind world building, it has been a brain builder, it has been a knowledge builder, it has been a knowledge builder. It has actually helped a lot of our people in their academics, and I can tell you that a lot of people have been giving a lot of good comments about my lectures. Like I said earlier on, we're still going to bring up other topics in other subjects or other related courses as we move along in this educational tsunami. So I remain your humble servant, David Oni. Don't forget to click on my notification button, also leave your comment and also share my video, and also don't forget to please also subscribe and also follow me on Facebook. Till we see next time, thank you so much.